Sometimes it's easy to find upside in fantasy football, but you have to pay up for that upside. A perfect example of this is if you go over and you look at where A.J. Dillon is being drafted. Go pull up the ADP of Alexander Mattison. Look at someone like Tony Pollard. These are all running backs that, hell, we know if the starter goes down in front of them, they're a top 10 option in fantasy. But what is tougher to find is not the Alexander Mattison, the player that we know he is a top 10 running back if Dalvin Cook goes down, but if Dalvin Cook's healthy, he has absolutely no role. What's tougher to find is a running back that is being priced in fantasy football at his current role, but there's hidden upside. There's hidden upside for more if the starter were to go down in front of him. So here we're going to go through about 4 or 5 running backs that I think are honestly being drafted close to their floors and have the hidden elite league-winning ceiling that we are searching for. But before we get into it, please go down there, drop a like in the video, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football, and let's just dive right into a running back we talk about all the time. I'm going to keep it brief with Mr. Kareem Hunt. Yes, with Hunt, I know, I get it. We talk about him all the time, but he's been one of my favorite draft targets for 2 years now? I really love drafting him in 2021. And right here, I find myself drafting him at an even cheaper price point in 2022. This is the perfect example of someone that we are talking about. If we head over right now and pull up Underdog Fantasy, this is a platform that has had hundreds of thousands of dollars of drafts on it, so this ADP should be pretty efficient. You see that Kareem Hunt's being drafted as the running back 32. He's being drafted at pick 97 overall. So we are consistently getting Kareem Hunt at the 8-9 turn, sometimes in the middle of the 9th round, which I find just absolutely ridiculous, because if we go through and if we look at the past 3 years from Mr. Kareem Hunt, he has averaged the running back 23 finish in Cleveland. This has been with a healthy Nick Chubb. Now, yes, Nick Chubb has missed some time. Now, what we have to understand is when Nick Chubb missed a stretch of games in 2020, technically, yes, Kareem Hunt was healthy. Technically, yes, Kareem Hunt was out there on the field. But remember, if you pull up the injury reports from then, we didn't know if Kareem Hunt was going to play. Everybody was running to waivers to pick up the 3rd string running back for the Cleveland Browns because Kareem Hunt himself was dealing with an ankle injury that in 2020, not 2021, we'll get there in just a second, but in 2020 when Nick Chubb missed that stretch of games, Kareem Hunt played but probably shouldn't have. And for this reason, Kareem Hunt really has not skewed his statistics at all in games that Nick Chubb has played in. If we pull it up, you've actually had 5 games where Kareem Hunt has played in Cleveland with no Nick Chubb. And in those 5 games, he actually averaged less points per game. He averaged less receptions per game. He was pretty much down across the entire board if you're looking at his receiving statistics during that time frame. What that tells us is okay, well, no, the overall stat line for Kareem Hunt over the past 3 years, it has not been skewed by a handful of games that maybe Kareem Hunt would have popped off with no Nick Chubb. We'll get to a player that some statistics are actually skewed about in a second. And this tells us that if Kareem Hunt's ultimate floor is the running back 23 when Nick Chubb's fully healthy, why are we not drafting him as a mid running back 3 in fantasy? We saw him whenever you had no Nick Chubb in his offense. I know, no Nick Chubb for a long time, hard to find for Kareem Hunt, but you can do it if you go back to Kansas City, where his rookie season in 2017, he led the NFL in rushing yards with over 1,300 yards. As a rookie, he led the NFL in rushing yards. He averaged 17 rushing attempts per game. He was almost right there back in year 2. So this is where that hidden elite upside is coming from. You identify a player that is being drafted either at their floor or slightly below it with the current role that they have in their offense. And we know that if Nick Chubb were to go down and Kareem Hunt were fully healthy, all of a sudden, I don't think it's going to be a 50-50 split with Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson. Now, yes, I will admit, Dearness Johnson will have himself a role. We saw that whenever Kareem Hunt, I believe, was he out with COVID? I don't know. Well, when Dearness Johnson got to play this past season, he looked damn good, but he's running behind an elite offensive line. This goes back to what we were saying with Kareem Hunt. If you have no Nick Chubb, all of a sudden he's in an offense that has possibly a top 5 quarterback, depending on how many games Deshaun Watson plays, a top 5 offensive line unit as well, and he has that 3 down bell cow ups. We talk about him all the time. I'm going to keep it brief. Running back 32 on Underdog, average finish over the past 3 years with Nick Chubb healthy. Running back 23. Draft Kareem Hunt in every single league. Literally every single league. There's no reason that you go into a draft and you did not come away with Kareem Hunt. Now let's go over to Melvin Gordon. This is going to be the example of looking at some skewed statistics, because if you pull up the split that you had between Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams this past season, I mean, it was pretty much damn near split 50-50. You had Melvin Gordon slightly ahead in carries per game. You had Melvin Gordon at 12.7 carries per game compared to Javonte Williams at 11.9. You had Javonte with a much larger role in the receiving game with 53 targets compared to Melvin Gordon at 38. Now, I will be the first person to admit, I was telling everybody to draft Javonte Williams last season. I think that Javonte Williams is an elite level running back. I think that he is extremely talented, and we saw this in the one game that you had from no Melvin Gordon. The one game you had from no Melvin Gordon, Javonte Williams went out there and he had 23 carries, 9 targets, and 178 total yards. So this is skewing the overall statistics that we have for these two running backs. And if we remove this game, I'm doing this through Rotoviz, love Rotoviz, but if we remove this one game, you are seeing that from a PPR standpoint, Javonte Williams last year averaged 11.1 points per game. Melvin Gordon at 13.3. You had Melvin Gordon at 13 rushing attempts per game. Javonte Williams at 11.5. So this was a backfield that was split either 50-50 or 55-45 in favor of Melvin Gordon. Now, am I projecting that to be the case this upcoming season? Hell no, I'm not projecting that to be the case. And neither is the overall fantasy football community. You have Javonte Williams being drafted as a running back 1 in fantasy, and Melvin Gordon, according to Underdog, being drafted as the running back 36. He's going directly behind Zach Ertz, Chase Edmonds, James Cook, Derek Carr, Chase Claypool. I like a couple of those players, but he's being drafted as that low-end running back 3, high-end running back 4, despite outscoring and outproducing Javonte Williams on a per game basis, besides the one game that Melvin Gordon were to miss. And we can go through and we can talk about either Javonte or Melvin Gordon and having that elite hidden upside if the other player were to go down. But when you're drafting Javonte Williams at the end of the second round, you're already paying for that upside. That upside is not hidden. The market understands it. So maybe I loved drafting Javonte Williams when he was going the 5th, 6th round last year, but I honestly can't get behind the Javonte Williams ADP this season. Whereas with Melvin Gordon, seems like he's being drafted at his floor, even if Javonte Williams expands his role. Javonte Williams takes over and he's winning this backfield 60% of the time. It's 60-40 between the two. Melvin Gordon's still going to return value on a running back 4 draft price. And if Javonte Williams were to go down, we've seen Melvin Gordon be a top 10 running back in fantasy before. He has the frame. The running back 3 on this depth chart currently is Mike Boone. This is what we're talking about. Draft those running backs at their floor. I mean, this is a perfect fit regardless of if you're a 0 RB team, regardless of if I'm trying to build around 3 elite level running backs and want to bring in a 4th. Melvin Gordon's a great guy because he's going to have a high floor, and if Javonte were to go down, access to an elite ceiling. And real quick, if you want to get into drafts with us on the live stream, if you want to get into drafts with us, I mean, every single day we are streaming these because it's the most fun thing you can do. Go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. On Underdog Fantasy, when you sign up through the link in the description of the video, they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You'll also get my 2022 rankings, our 2022 Dynasty rankings, our Dynasty Rookie rankings, our Dynasty Rookie Draft. You will get so much. You'll support this channel, and most importantly, you'll be able to have some fun and get some real money fantasy football drafts. I've already done like 150 of these, but let's move on and let's go to one of my most drafted running backs that I was not expecting to get. Like literally, I just spent the entire offseason on our Dynasty channel talking down on this player. So now I look like a complete fraud when I'm saying that he is a running back that has hidden upside. Michael Carter Jr. Now with Michael Carter Jr., he came out last year in an offense that had a decent platoon of running backs going through. I mean, you had Ty Johnson of all people drawing 55 targets. You had Tevin Coleman. You had running backs with a role in New York last year. But Michael Carter, because he's an elite receiving running back, was still able to demand 11% of the New York Jets passing offense on a per game basis. And now you have Breece Hall coming in, and I was leading this train. Remember, on Underdog Fantasy, in real money fantasy football drafts after the NFL draft, Michael Carter was still going before Alexander Mattison, was still going neck and neck with Tony Pollard. And I'm looking around going, okay, guys, come on. He doesn't have the same upside as Alexander Mattison. He doesn't have the same upside as Tony Pollard. He needs to be going a round or two lower than these players. Since then, he's fallen about 8 rounds. Maybe I'm off on that. The man's pick 141 right now. He's going behind Van Jefferson, behind Jacoby Myers, behind Jamison Crowder. And I'm looking at this saying, okay, well, if he's being drafted as the running back 44, what does he actually need to do to just provide value on that pick? What do you have to do to be a running back 44 in fantasy football? If we go through and just pull up the running back finishes in a full PPR format on a per game basis last season, here are the running backs that were around that range of running back 44. You had, dear God, Jamal Williams, Devontae Booker, Devontae Freeman, Donta Foreman, Zach Moss, Kenyon Drake, Alexander Mattison, Dontrell Hilliard, Mike Davis, Sony Michel. That's the kind of value you're expecting. But when we're taking Carter here, we can assume that based on his receiving upside, what if he's Nyheim Hines, right? You have Breece Hall staying healthy all season. He's Nyheim Hines, who averaged 7 points per game last year. Is that going to lose your league? If Breece Hall stays healthy all season, if Breece Hall turns into Jonathan Taylor and Michael Carter Jr. is Nyheim Hines, and he averages 7 points per game, and you took him in the 11th round of your fantasy draft, are you losing? No, you're not losing your league. Michael Carter Jr. currently being drafted neck and neck with Nyheim Hines. But the difference between the two is we know if Jonathan Taylor were to go down, does Nyheim Hines step into a 3-down workload? Or does Nyheim Hines keep his same role and you have a different running back in Indianapolis stepping up to be the first and second down player? Probably Nyheim Hines just stays in his same role. Maybe he starts to get an extra target or two per game. Maybe it slightly increases his role, but not really changing too much. Whereas with Michael Carter Jr., you're drafting him for that passing down role. Very similar. Jonathan Taylor is a 3-down workhorse. Breece Hall will be a 3-down workhorse. But you still have a small role in the receiving game. And I was arguing against people saying this, I don't know how long ago, but they were arguing to take him over Alexander Mattison. I'm not trying to say that. So you have that small role in the receiving game, but if Breece Hall were to go down, Michael Carter Jr. does have the frame to actually be able to handle, I don't want to say an entire 3-down workload, but the man can handle 12 carries a game. He can get to 12 carries a game and at the same time average 5 targets a game if we assume that those Ty Montgomery touches are no longer there. Drafting him at his floor, and he has access to a higher ceiling if Breece Hall were to go down. Now let's move over to our next running back. This is going to be a rookie. We have 2 rookies on this list. Our first one, a part of an elite level offense, Rashaad White. Now, Rashaad White this past year was the best passing game running back probably in the entire draft. I mean, if you look at his college target share at Arizona State, dear God, it's laughable. It is off the charts. He almost averaged 20% of his team's target share at Arizona State. And the issue with Rashaad White going into the NFL draft is we didn't know where he was going to get drafted. If you looked at NFL mock drafts, a lot of people had Rashaad White going in like the 5th round. So I was saying, okay, yeah, I mean, he's a great athlete. He is an elite pass catcher, but I don't know if we can value him in fantasy football if he's not going to get the team investment. Well, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took him with the 91st pick overall. In that range, that indicates, especially in today's age, maybe back in 2006, it didn't mean it, but in today's NFL, 100%. If you're drafted inside the top 100 picks at the running back position, your team has a plan. Your team has a role for you. And with White, that role is most likely not going to be enough for you to start him in fantasy. Very similar to Michael Carter Jr. If you're on Underdog Fantasy, you're playing in a best ball format, I think Rashaad White could potentially step into a Nyheim Hines type role in Tampa. Leonard Fournette will still get his. Leonard Fournette will still be near the very top of the NFL in targets per game. But just think about how many plays the Bucs run per game. Think about how many passing plays the Bucs run per game compared to league average. This team went out of their way. They drafted Keyshawn Vaughn in 2020 in the 3rd round. They went and signed Giovanni Bernard this past offseason. They want another passing down running back here. So maybe in a best ball format like Underdog Fantasy, you will get some random spike weeks from a player like Rashaad White, where he's being drafted as the running back 42. Now, he's being drafted at pick 131, so he's being drafted about 10 selections ahead of Michael Carter Jr. I think I'm unable to justify the price gap between these two players. Like, if you ask me who I prefer between the two, I would probably go Michael Carter Jr., assuming that he has a larger role through the first month of the season. But Rashaad White would have that elite level ceiling if Leonard Fournette were to go down in Tampa, because all of a sudden he would be one of the better passing down running backs in the NFL, in a top 5 passing offense overall that has targets go around. You have an injured Chris Godwin. You have no Antonio Brown. We don't even know if Gronk's going to be back. Rashaad White has a ton of upside as a receiver. I definitely prefer him a little bit more in best ball, so you can capture some of those random spike weeks. And our last player, honestly, kind of similar, is going to be Isaiah Spiller. So Isaiah Spiller also lands in a fantastic offense. He lands in Los Angeles. I mean, we know Justin Herbert's going to elevate this entire team to probably be a top 5 offense yet again this upcoming season. Now, I will say, I will admit, you are not going to be able to start Isaiah Spiller in a regular league. Yes, he will maybe jump into your starting lineup in a best ball format based on his receiving upside. Someone that got to Texas A&M, and he was a great pass catcher right away at Texas A&M. It's more about the situation he falls in, and that, in a best ball format, he is going to get touches on a week-to-week basis. We have never seen Austin Eckler be a true traditional workhorse level running back. Now, I mean, if we go through and if we look at Austin Eckler and what he did this past season, it's a little deceiving because it was truly an outlier year compared to what we are used to with Austin Eckler. This was a running back that went out and averaged 51% of his team's carries. But if we look historically since, just say 2019, if we look at the past 3-year average, Austin Eckler, on average, accounts for 42% of the carries in this offense. That's less than half. Now, Isaiah Spiller is not going to get 50%. No, Isaiah Spiller will be probably closer to about 30%, 25% of the carries in Los Angeles. But from a best ball perspective, he could randomly spike into your flex spot. He can randomly spike into your running back 2 spot on a 0 RB build if he falls into the end zone, which there should be a ton of red zone opportunities in Los Angeles, given Justin Herbert elevating this overall team. But what you need to be excited about is if Eckler were to go down, all of a sudden Isaiah Spiller could probably 1-for-1 fill that Austin Eckler role. He'll be less efficient. Of course, he won't be as good as Austin Eckler, but if he can manage to get 5.9 targets a game like Eckler did this past season, if he can manage to get 40% of the carries in Los Angeles, dear God, he would have high-end running back 2 upside. And like I said, in a best ball format, I think based on the fact that you're never expecting Eckler to have an extremely large role, he probably does provide you running back 4 value. Now, please let me know what y'all thought of this video. I know we were a little all over the place. Also, let me know in the comment section if there were any players you feel like I missed out on. And I think that should be it. Please make sure you go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, and I hope we get to see you with the live stream tonight.